Most watch enthusiasts dislike fashion watches, and for good reason. It is usually fashion houses leveraging their association with luxury to sell underwhelming watches that are not worth their price tag. But what happens when a fashion house starts to actually invest in their watchmaking? At what point do we take them seriously? I'd argue this is the point we are at with Chanel. Now, I should say, this isn't a new thing. I think of brands like Bulgari, who are making some serious horological machines, often holding the thinnest watch title, yet there is a faction of watch enthusiasts who will always see them as a fashion brand. I personally think this attitude is horribly snobby, unnecessary, and against the spirit of horology. It is quote-unquote enthusiasts who are making watchmaking into this closed-gated community where only 19th century brands, who are probably now owned by Swatch, are taken seriously. But that's a rant for another time. Today, I want to talk about what's going on with Chanel watches, are their watches any good, and what the future might have in store for Chanel. The watch movement is often referred to as the beating heart of a watch. For many enthusiasts, it is what made them fall in love with horology in the first place. The technical craftsmanship that goes into making a mechanical watch movement, an analog device that attempts to measure the fourth dimension and actually does this to a fairly accurate degree. In 2018, Chanel took a minority stake, 20%, in the Swiss movement manufacturer Kenissi, and Kenissi supplied the movement for the new J12. Now, I've made an entire video about Kenissi before in the past. I'll stick it in one of these corners. Now, I don't know what corner it goes in, but it'll be in one of them. But for the quick version, Kenissi is basically the movement arm of Tudor watches. They were founded in 2015, the same year Tudor released their first in-house caliber, and they also have an industrial partnership with Breitling and the use of the B20 time-only movement, and a partnership with Chanel supplying the movement for the J12. Now, there's something interesting happening in the world of in-house movements and what qualifies a movement as in-house. There seems to be 3 different avenues that watch brands take. So there's the traditional way. There's a watchmaker who designs, develops, and creates their movements in-house. So think Simone Brett, George Daniels, or Roger Smith, or for more mainstream, Patek Philippe. There's option 2, which is producing a movement in-house, but not necessarily designing it fully in-house. I'm thinking of Tag Heuer and the controversy of the 1887, which was technically produced by them, but not necessarily designed by them. And then there's option 3, or what I like to call the Rolex option. Since its inception, Rolex exclusively used Egler movements. Hans Wilsdorf would make trips to Bienne several times a year and worked closely with the Egler family on the technical development of their movements. It wasn't until 2004 that Rolex outright purchased the movement-making facilities from the Egler family, so they were then able to say they made their movements in-house as they owned the movement facilities. Now, Chanel, with their movements, although they aren't technically making their movements in-house, with their substantial investment into Kenissi, it kind of feels like that's what they are building up towards. Even beyond that, even if they aren't wanting to make something fully in-house one day, it is interesting that they have invested in an industrial movement maker. It at least shows that they believe in the future of mechanical watchmaking, the idea of Kenissi, and they want a piece of that pie. Now, beyond movements, Chanel has made significant investments into independent watchmakers. Starting in 1998, when Chanel acquired a 49% stake in Bell & Ross, and then in 2002 completely acquired Bell & Ross. In 2011, they took a minority stake in Romain Gauthier, an independent watch company. I've not been able to find a confirmed percentage online, but I would guess 20 to 30%. They also call in Gauthier now and again for movement expertise, such as with the 2016 Monsieur de Chanel watch, which houses the Caliber 1, which was partly produced by Romain Gauthier. Also, if I could just take a minute to gush about this watch. The Monsieur is a beautifully executed jump hour that I feel like more people should be talking about. But back on track, Chanel investments. In 2018, Chanel took a minority stake of 20% in FP Journe, arguably one of the greatest living watchmakers, but as you probably know, I'm an FP Journe fangirl. And then, in more recent news, just this year, August 2024, Chanel made a 25% investment in MB&F, a very quirky independent known for avant-garde designs and pushing the boundaries of what a watch is. Chanel clearly sees some benefit in investing in luxury watchmakers and acquiring a stake in their business. I was recently looking into the MB&F stake, as a lot of us were, and a lot of the watch press seemed to have a very positive spin on it. This investment will now give the MB&F team some money and time to develop new crazy things. It's some buffer money to be more experimental. At least that's what the watch press are saying, and I think they're absolutely right. This is a great thing. This is great for these independents to have some more cash infused and remain managing their brand. But also, Chanel isn't a charity. They aren't acquiring these huge stakes out of the kindness of their heart. They clearly believe in the future of luxury watches and where it is going, and they want a piece of that pie. I think the benefit for them is twofold. One, making relationships with amazing watchmaking maisons to maybe lean on their expertise, like their relationship with Romain Gauthier. And two, they want to have a small piece of a big pie and equity in the future of horology. Chanel is one of those brands watch enthusiasts are sleeping on because we're horrible snobs who can't see beyond the name on a dial, even though we like to pretend we're unbiased and we're completely autonomous in the watches we like and our watch tastes. Please don't unsubscribe. Hear me out here. For starters, there's the Chanel J12, which is so freaking cool, with a ceramic and steel case, 200 meters of water resistance, and the caliber J12.1 and J12.2, which are Kenissi calibers and have 70 hours of power reserve. But we need to talk about the J12 Automaton caliber 6. Now, this watch aesthetically might not be to your tastes. I personally love it, and I think it's adorable and jolly, and it's a beautiful tribute to Chanel. But I know it won't be for everyone. This watch features the caliber 6 movement, which is designed and assembled by Chanel. Something that is kind of awesome about fashion watches is that they are allowed to experiment and do different things that traditional maisons would struggle with. I'm thinking of the weird necklace headphone watch from Geneva Watch Days this year. This is so weird, and I would never buy this. This isn't to my taste, but I'm still so happy that I live in a world where this exists. I feel like if Moser did this, watch collectors would be like, oh, it's so playful, it's so tongue-in-cheek, it's so Moser. But because Chanel did this, it's not as celebrated. I feel like in these past few decades, or maybe even the last century, watches have become such a male-dominated space. Brands like Rolex and Tudor have almost been rewriting history to make it seem like watches have always been about functionality and watches aren't cool unless they're sports watches. When really, the history of wristwatches and mechanical timekeeping is a lot of jewelry and gem setting and weirdo stuff like necklace watches. In fact, pendant watches were a huge trend in the 1700s. Even this year, Jaeger-LeCoultre released a pendant watch. I feel like the Chanel necklet headphone jack watch thing is the best infusion of classical watch design and modern technology. I think it's brilliant. Even though it's not for me, I still appreciate it. Okay, where are we going with this? Chanel is clearly investing in the future of horology through small pieces of equity in emerging watchmakers, industrial movement suppliers, and leaning on the expertise of watchmakers like Romain Gauthier. I think Chanel seriously has their eye on high horology, and they're going to continue investing in their watchmaking, and they should not be written off as a mere fashion brand. The J12 houses a Kenissi movement. If you're someone like me who goes gaga over Tudor and their movements, you really cannot write off Chanel in the movement department. Then you have their move towards in-house movements like with the Caliber 6 and the Automaton. And then you have watches like this, the J12 Diamond Tourbillon and the Monsieur Jump Hour, retrograde minute, manual wind movement, 70 hours of power reserve, and Romain Gauthier assisted in the movement development. It's exciting stuff. I think Chanel is in a transition from fashion watch to serious watchmaking player. In conclusion, I really understand being suspicious and skeptical of fashion brands creating watches. I always meet these with a skeptical eye, but I think to write off Chanel, as they are right now, is a bit unfair and maybe a bit pretentious. More watches in the space, investment into indies, and advances in innovation should always be a welcomed thing. So I'm going to give Chanel a chance, and I'm excited for what the future might hold. Hey guys, tried a little abrupt end there. I'm not sure how it went. I hope it went okay. But the names on the screen right now are the lovely, gorgeous, fabulous, wonderful Pope tier patrons. Thank you to this tier of patrons, but also thank you to all tiers of patrons. I always say you guys keep the lights on here at Gringa HQ, and you really do. All of the money that comes through Patreon goes right back in. It is reinvested into the channel to hopefully make it even more awesome, and I hope more people keep enjoying it. This was a slightly different video for me. You might have loved it, you might have hated it. Let me know, but thank you so much. All tier patrons, but most specifically Pope tier patrons. You guys are awesome.